Well, hello again, Red Deer. Mayor Ken here with another after council interview, and I'll get to the significance of the premises in just a minute. But as always, I am honored to be joined by Deputy Mayor Cindy Jeffries. Deputy, welcome to our session. And Greg, always great to have a new location to speak from. And folks, we're at Scotiabank today, main branch downtown, 50th and 50th. The home of yours truly for 13 years before I retired back in the day and went into public life. So, you know, Greg, it's quite a homecoming for me today to be in the office, to be in the very space that I occupied for all these years. You know, looking around this morning, not hard to feel nostalgic for sure. But great to be with you, Red Deer, and let's get underway. Let's kick it off.
Wonderful. So I was hoping to speak about zoning bylaw for addiction, recovery, and homelessness. So at the November 12th meeting, Council passed first reading of zoning bylaw amendments to support addiction, recovery, and homelessness. Mayor, what will these adjustments mean to how the city is able to support needs of vulnerable populations in our community?
Well, thank you, Greg. You know, that is a great question for sure. And we have to remember, of course, we're only in first reading, which means the public hearing and so on doesn't occur until this coming Monday and so on. But what the bylaw lays out in a general fashion is it has several components. One is the expansion of the shelter itself to allow for winter warming. And certainly on days like this, folks, when it's minus 20 outside and so on, and our homeless population has grown significantly over the last 3 or 4 years, we can certainly appreciate that. So there's winter warming. There's also an element on the bylaw to extend Safe Harbor's occupancy permit or delivery, if you will, of shelter services for the next 3 years. That expires or would have expired in May of this year. So the city is doing it 6 months prior to make sure that the discussions occur and the public input is obtained. The other element is an addition of detox beds to Safe Harbor. There was a cap or limit placed on the number of detox spaces by the bylaw several years ago. Safe Harbor is now expanding its detox, or wants to expand its detox services. So we'll speak about that. And then there's also zoning for a supervised consumption site that occurred, I'm going to say circa 2017 or so, and so on. That's also up for debate. So there's several important components. The bottom line right now is that we are still in public hearing. So we'll hear from the public, we'll hear from different stakeholders, obviously our own administration and obviously council when we consider the matter on Monday.
Okay, then Councillor Jeffries, if approved, speaking of these adjustments, how do these adjustments align with City Council's broader vision for addressing housing and social challenges in Red Deer?
It doesn't really help us with the housing piece yet. It's one of those transitional pieces where we'll have more shelter capacity, more services available for vulnerable population in our community, which, as Mayor Ken has said, is growing, sadly, but we see that clear across the country. So it will help maintain the continuum of services that our community needs. While we try hard, desperately hard, as this council has, to locate space for a permanent shelter, but we're really pushing now for transitional housing spaces and permanent supportive housing spaces. Yes. You know, the vacancy rate in Red Deer is below 1%, and rental rates are high. There's just not space available for people to live. So that compounds the problems that we're seeing with affordability across the country, the rising costs that people are faced with. So it's a very complex situation. We're not alone for sure in that, and this will help. It buys us some time. It's a bit of a stopgap measure to have that expansion there. Hopefully it's a temporary thing that we don't need to have that capacity for many, many years.
Very good. Moving on to downtown governance. looks like City Council authorized exploration for a shift in service delivery right here in downtown Red Deer that seems to better enable all community partners to proactively address the unique needs and challenges of the downtown area. I'm deeply passionate about downtown Red Deer. We're right here in the Red Deer main branch of Ross Street location. Business certainly committed to improving the well-being of small businesses and communities that operate in downtown Red Deer. So, Mayor Johnson, how does City Council envision this governance shift enhancing collaboration and addressing the evolving needs of greater downtown?
Well, Greg, thank you, and also thank you, obviously, for the bank's presence in downtown. It's certainly something we value quite dearly. To your point around the downtown itself, when I occupied the space here in the mid-'90s and so on, the DBA had a geographical boundary that had been set over 10 years prior to that. So we've had a boundary around the Downtown Business Association, which is really a legislated boundary that we set back then to promote the interests of the core, if you will. Downtown's expanded quite a bit. Certainly, when you think about, if you ask somebody now, what is downtown, you may get everything from rail yards to the north here. You may get Capstone to the southwest over here. You may get businesses down by the Baymont and some of the denser housing in Robin's Nest and so forth. And all of these locations are outside the existing boundary of the BIA or the Business Improvement Zone, if you will. So Council and the DBA and the general voice of downtown is saying now that a refresh, if you will, or certainly a reset of how we're doing governance, promotion of the downtown itself now needs a reset. So we've asked administration to go and explore that. Businesses like yours would be consulted in terms of, are we on the right track? Do you have any ideas for us? Where should we be going? So we'll be doing lots of consultation. We'll be striking a group, an advisory group or advisory body here in the next few months, consisting of people from the broader downtown, the greater downtown, if you will, and that's going to also guide the work. I suspect by, I would say, a Q3 of next year, which typically would run from June to September. So if you can think about a report coming back to council between June and September of next year, that's when I expect the work will be rolled up. And council will make recommendations on it at that time. So it's exciting work. In many ways, since being mayor, and Red Deer, you'll know this, and I'm looking straight at you. I've said we've got 40,000 households in Red Deer, and if you spent $5 a month in the downtown, you'd boost its economic activity, by $3 or $4 million just in a month. So you can, do the math and so on. So we're looking forward to it. It's exciting work, and we'll see what we get.
Wonderful. I've noticed that Downtown Business Associations reached out to us as a member to give some of that consultation period. So
very good.
Great to hear that they're entering that consultation for the larger business improvement area.
You bet.
Moving on to budget, utility budgets and rates. So City Council reviewed and discussed the proposed utility rates and budget, focusing on ensuring sustainability of critical services while balancing affordability for residents and businesses. So, Councillor Jeffries, how does the proposed utility budget and rate adjustments align with the city's long-term goals for sustainability while also maintaining the commitments for affordability for residents?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Council's been doing a lot of work on utilities over the past, year, I guess, Mayor Ken. It's several workshops just looking at how do our utilities work within our city? How are they governed? What's council's role in all of that? Is it right for us for the future? It's worked well to now. What do we have to do to position our city for the best support and reliability of services within the city going forward. So we've had great discussions about that. Utility rates are, of course, one thing that council can impact. And we always compare, where do we fit? Where do we sit in relation to others in the province? How do our prices and our rates compare? Where are we at? We're quite comfortable being about middle of the pack. Historically, Red Deer has always kind of gone that route. And so we look to how can we develop the reserves that we will need for future infrastructure needs. How do we find that critical balance between what people are paying and what we need for the future? How can we kind of be steady on that and consistent over time? And so we're trying to position ourselves in what I would say is a very fair position, but also sets us up well for the future.
Wonderful. So I think we're going to move on to the budget. A lot of budget discussions, I imagine, in the last couple of weeks here. Last week, City Council approved municipal tax increases of 10.5% after 4 days of deliberating capital and operating budgets. So Mayor Johnson, I would say, what are the key priorities that shape the decision of the 2025 budget, and how do those changes align with the city's long-term goals?
Well, I think you struck on it. It's a great question. When you talked about long-term goals, this particular budget wasn't just a budget for 2025. It tried to position us and will position us, frankly, for the years ahead. The last 5 years, I'll say, have not been kind to Red Deer from several perspectives. There's obviously the impact of COVID, but Red Deer wasn't alone, in experiencing COVID. But there was also very little growth in the city. That certainly was quite challenging, and the impact of some of our decisions. And I've been around now for 12 years, and I have the benefit, just as I did in Scotiabank in the years and years that I was here. When you'd make a decision, what's its impacts down the road. So in retrospect, some of the taxation decisions that we made were simply too low to sustain us going forward. And we leaned too heavily on reserves. We particularly leaned heavily on the years that we had 0% increases. So part of this budget is a catch-up, if you will, in terms of replenishing those reserves and stabilizing. We're in a bank today, folks, so I'm going to say stabilizing our balance sheet. There's not a banker here today that wouldn't understand that, and so on. So part of it was that. But it was also a reaction to the growth that we're experiencing now. So we funded additional growth resources in our community. We funded additional policing resources in our community to react to those particular realities. We sustained the operations of our recreation centers, our transit centers, and so on. Very difficult optically when people would look at, say, 10.5, as opposed to understanding or at least being able to see that this translates to around $20, I'll say $25, I'll round it up, for the average homeowner per month in the city. And we still have lower rates than cities our size, like Lethbridge and Airdrie and so on. So it's difficult. If anybody tuned in or read the coverage of the budget over the last those 4 days, would have seen the tremendous amount of passion that was brought to the table, the constant asking of where can we remove this, can we shift this, can we delay this, and so on. In the end, I'll quote my good colleague here, who certainly repeated several times that we can't keep kicking the ball down the road. The financial realities that we have right now need to be addressed. And really that was the context of the work that we did.
Wonderful. Councillor Jeffries, how does the approved 2025 budget address the balance between maintaining those essential services and then the rising costs affecting residents?
Yeah, I think it's like utilities, it's fairly complex, right? And there's things that go into budget and the operation of the city that as a citizen, as a homeowner, I wouldn't necessarily see. If you take, we often talk about, as a consumer, as a homeowner, we talk about a basket of goods and what it might cost us to live. Well, if we look at a municipal basket of goods, some the things that the city needs to purchase in order to provide services and keeps citizens supported in the services that we do provide. If you look at that basket of municipal goods, there's been some parts of that basket that have risen as much as 23%. The cost of asphalt, for example, the cost of concrete is way up. And so the services that we provide are not just rising by cost of inflation that you or I might think of. So we need to keep that into consideration. Mayor Ken referenced the cuts that had been, or the zeros, the hold it steady that had, that was the decision of the day, and we've seen that in the past. That doesn't even keep us whole against inflation, as you would know. And so we're doing a bit of catch up. It's a little bit of a correction, I would say, this year to try and boost. I know it's painful. Nobody wants a double-digit tax increase. But when we look, I think collectively at the overall operation of the city, at the long-term sustainability of services, the infrastructure, we've been deferring maintenance and upkeep on many of our assets. And the city holds a number of assets. We want to get the best and longest life out of those assets, roads, pipes, facilities, all of those things. We need to take good care of them. And I think as a city, we historically have done a great job of that, getting the best mileage out of all of those things. Without that maintenance, we'll start to pay dearly as we go down the road further. So I think this budget, as hard as it is to say that that's where we've arrived in these times, recognizing that budgets are tight for everyone. We know it's not what people want to hear. Lots of things in our lives go up and we don't have a say in those. And somehow we expect the city to continue to deliver services at the same rates that they've been delivering 20 years ago. And it's just not sustainable and it's not really realistic. So it's tough. I always use, and I've said this probably 100 times in the last week, Mayor Ken might hit me. Slow and steady wins the race. Instead of having these highs and lows and this kind of volatility on our tax rate, we might be best to aim for a little more gradual graph line, if you will, so that we're keeping pace with inflation, considering growth or no growth. The other thing that's been a huge impact for us is the reduction in provincial grants coming to municipalities, and that's also quite volatile. It's up and down, and for a long time, the provincial government has looked to provide certainty, sustainability, and predictability for municipalities. We haven't got there yet, for sure. There's still that volatility there for us, and unknowns, uncertainty, and so and a tremendous reduction in that grant level, which we're feeling as well. So all these things contribute to that, where we landed last week, and I think we found a decent balance for both the city and ongoing services that we need to provide looking down the road a few years.
You mentioned those $0 increases in the past, kind of putting us in this position, extreme increases in the cost of some goods. How are you communicating those financial challenges with the residents? You mentioned a very emotional potential budget discussion. How are you maybe communicating those financial challenges and opportunities with the residents?
Well, certainly this particular interview we're doing is a wonderful example of how we've approached it, Greg. We started the work on budget 2025 in January of this year. We concluded one budget. It was a bit of an interim budget, and then we messaged our public that budget 2025 in the fall, in November, obviously, of this year, was going to be a budget where we had to address those fiscal realities and so on. And I must say I was so grateful for so much public participation in the process over the last few months. We had farmers markets, we had some town halls, we had an online survey, we communicated things into the media, across social media, all of those things, signaling to people that difficult conversations were coming, difficult choices were coming. But if we wanted to see the sustained health of our city, we were going to have to address the realities that were in front of us. Going forward, I have a colleague in communications that has done a great job of preparing a message on my behalf for the community as it relates to the things that we're talking about right now, and we'll be going forward with that. And certainly I, as mayor, will be going into the community in the new year with what are called State of the City addresses and so on, and bringing those messages forward. So there's many forums that I'm involved in and so on that those realities, those rationales, and where we are, we can certainly express. My hat's off to the process that we did, which lasted 9 months, 10 months to get us to November, and the public weighing in. I often call it, that's three-stranded cord. We call it the weave in City Hall, which is council, the public, and our administration or experts. We combine the three perspectives and make, what I would call a very strong alignment there. And that is where we ended up, and we'll be communicating it that way.
Is there anything else from the November council meeting or budget deliberations that you'd like to mention, or broadly summarize those 4 days of deliberation?
I think it's important for people, if you didn't watch or if you didn't tune in, it's not an easy decision budget week for council. And sometimes it does go longer than a week. So I think we did well to get through capital in 1 day and operating in 4. Or was it 3? Must have been 3.
Must have been 3, yes.
And as a member of council, and for sure for the mayor, it's a grueling time. You're emotionally keyed up, you're listening, you're firing on a lot of cylinders all at once. And there's a lot of emotion, a lot of, thought that goes into it, sometimes sleepless nights, trying to figure out what you think and where you want to land and what you feel comfortable with. And so there's a lot of soul searching through the process that council goes through. And I think our council had some very hard discussions, debated most issues well, I think, and at the end of the day came away okay with the decision, respecting each other through it. I mean, obviously, some would be happier if things had gone maybe a little lower. We all would be if it was realistic.
Yes.
But council landed where it is, and I think we all respect where we've landed, and that we'll continue to work tomorrow on the next things that are before us.
Yeah, well said. That's well said. I certainly would echo that for sure. I think we were the community had an expectation that council would go over or go into the debate, I should say, Greg, turning over every stone, if you will, looking at every possibility. I said to administration on the last day of debate, I want you to go shake out the cushions one more time, see if there's anything in the sofa that and they did. They went back and really brought us the reality of what we have. I think it was in many ways a very courageous decision to be able to say now that we have to face what we have to face now, and we've done our best as public servants. This is my 12th year now in public service, and I'm comforted by the public saying you don't have to be perfect in public service. You're allowed to make a mistake, but you always need to do your best. And when I think of administration, council, and the public itself, I think we all did our best to land where we're at.
Wonderful. That's all I have for questions for you today. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you.
Thanks
You,
for
you know,
hosting us.
thank you, Greg. I'll sign off if I could and say, Red Deer, once again, a privilege to be in an employer that I had for 40 years. And certainly the last, quote, leg of my career, if you will, was here in Red Deer, a city we all love. Tonight, the bank, Scotiabank, will celebrate their best of the best. They will award a myriad of awards across the province, across districts, and so forth, to showcase the folks that are emerging and the leaders in the industry. So I congratulate the bank on that, Greg, and hope you have a great evening. And Red Deer, thank you for your feedback. Council and I always look forward to it. We will or maybe won't see you in December. I'm just making sure. We will see you in December, Red Deer. I was a bit concerned about that, but it looks like we will see you in December. So we'll catch up then. Stay safe. And this is Mayor Ken signing off. Thank you.